So the second installment of Berserk starts with Guts in a forest, and he hears something calling for him. You cannot escape us. You cannot escape. Now, it should be noted that Kentaro Miura actually colored these panels. However, they were never released in the Dark Horse edition. They're thusly called the Lost Colored Pages of Berserk, so they are out there on the internet if you want to take a look for yourself. Otherwise, I put them in this video as well, so you're seeing them right now as I talk. And then we see these dark spirits going for Guts. You know, he's pulling out his Dragon Slayer again. And we got this really nice panel of a bird flying through the sky. Now, this might be a little bit of foreshadowing on Miura's part. You know, this might be representing Griffith, the White Hawk. Who knows? And then we see Puck on the bird, and the bird drops down to the tree. He even thanks the bird. He's like, thanks, mister. Now, as it turns out, Puck is looking for Guts, and he mentions that, oh, well, maybe some wolves ate him or something, which is kind of interesting because we don't know it at this point, but later on in the story, Guts was chased by wolves after he killed Gambino and left the mercenary band that was taking care of him. So, a little bit of foreshadowing on Miura's part again. And then Puck finally meets up with Guts. You know, Guts is all bloodied and bruised up. He's very tired because he just fought off all those spirits. Now, Puck offers to heal Guts again, but Guts is more concerned about the fact that Puck is following him around. So even when someone has offered help to him, you know, he knows that Puck can heal him. He doesn't really care. He's just like, why are you bothering me? Get out of my business already. And even though Guts is this brutish man, Puck's like, you know what? I want to hang around you for a bit. I got nothing else going on in my life right now. Like, let's be buddies. And Guts, obviously, he doesn't take a liking to this, so he just tosses him into a puddle of water. I don't like elves, and I don't like you, says Guts. And he elaborates that the reason that he doesn't like him is that he views him as a weakling. And because he's a weakling, he feels like he wants to crush him. Guts eventually walks off, and Puck yells, you bastard! Now it starts to rain, and we see a caravan approaching Guts. And the man inside even offers him a ride. Again, not wanting to take anyone's help, Guts refuses. Now this might be the first moment in the Berserk manga in which Guts expresses some sort of empathy for others. It turns out that the reason he doesn't want to go in the caravan is because he's being pursued by evil spirits. And if he were to go in the caravan, he would put them in harm's way. So even though it's very subtle, we see a little bit of compassion on Guts' part. Now, inside the caravan is Puck. He's right by Colette, the little girl. Now, a trivia question for this chapter. It's not officially stated in the manga who this man is. However, in the 2016 anime, this man, Colette's father, is given a name. What is his name? Pause the video if you want to answer the question. Otherwise, if you want to be spoiled, his name is Adolf.
By the way, what's your name?
It's Guts.
I'm Adolf, and my daughter is Colette.
Now, before Guts enters the caravan, we notice a bunch of spirits in the woods, so very ominous, a little bit of foreshadowing on Miura's part again. Guts notices that Puck's already in the caravan, and Puck's like, hey, I got here first, so don't be bitching at me this time around. I'm not following you. Colette shows Guts some kindness by offering him some homemade wine, and she inquires about the wounds on his body, and he says, like I said, evil spirits are after me. Now this next part's pretty funny because Adolf is like, by the way, is that some sort of sword?
You serious?
What else would it be? You know, it's got a sharp pointy end, it's got a handle. I mean, I get it, like, he's trying to make a reference to the fact that it's so big, there's no way anyone could wield it. How could it be a sword? But I thought it was just kind of funny because it's so obviously a sword, and yet he's asking, what is that, a sword? Like, it's like if someone saw you with a piece of bread and like, what is that, a piece of bread? Yeah, dude, like, have you not been a human for the last 50, 60 years? And then Adolf even makes a comment saying, it looks like you could cut a horse in half with that thing. Which is funny because we just saw that in the previous chapter. Now, Adolf mentions that he doesn't really have much respect for the profession of killing people. He doesn't really like mercenaries. And it makes a lot of sense because he's a priest, so I mean, he's not going to have any respect for mercenary or warriors or anything like that. But the real reason that he doesn't really have respect for them is because his nephew ended up dying 5 years ago in some sort of battlefield. And then Guts is like, well, he died doing what he wanted to do, right? I bet he was happy. And then the next part is very ominous and a little bit of foreshadowing again. Of course, once you die, that's it. Nothing comes after that. Nothing at all. and there's a bit of seriousness in his face right here, so you could tell that there's obviously gonna be something after death. I mean, he's obviously being chased by evil spirits, and the way he says it just feels very ominous, and we know that there's apostles running around in the world, so there's probably something in the afterlife that Mira is teasing out right here, but obviously that will come in another chapter. Now, I thought it was sweet here that Colette gave Guts a blanket when he was falling asleep. That was a really nice moment. I don't think I ever realized this before, but I think Colette is like developing a little bit of a crush on Guts, which, you know, is going to be the first of many. You know, we got Colette, and then later on, Casca, Farnese, Shirka, they all develop a crush on Guts at some point. So I guess the first one that we see in the manga is Colette. Now, during Guts' dream, we see that he's in this labyrinth, an eyeball is staring at him, and he's running through like shallow water, and then someone says, "You cannot run away from us." He eventually steps on a spike, it goes right through his foot, and then we see a gigantic creature, the creature that we saw in the previous chapter, bearing down on him, and he starts to scream in a panic. And then when he wakes up, he's stabbing an incubus that was giving him this bad nightmare. And as it turns out, they're evil spirits that give people nightmares and feed off of their fear. Now, what's really interesting about this is that if you've read H.P. Lovecraft, this bears a distinct resemblance to Cthulhu. So definitely an inspiration for Mira, and you'll see a lot of those inspirations show up in future chapters as well. Guts mentions that the reason that he's being chased by such monsters is because of the brand. It turns out that the brand summons them, and just then, Guts notices that his brand is bleeding right now, so it's battle time, guys! Now, this is an interesting quote. When Guts leaves the caravan, he says, "Incubi are born of mixed blood and sexual fluids of those who died filled with hatred and malice." Which means that somewhere around here, there must be some corpses of bandits or the like who have died violently. Now, of course, we haven't gotten to this point in the manga yet, but the first thing I thought of was Corcus. Now, he was a man that was filled with a lot of hatred and malice, and the way that he died was in the arms of a apostle woman, the very apostle that Guts kills in the very first chapter of the manga. So you would think that maybe in the afterlife he turned into an incubi. Just a thought. Obviously there's no verification, it's just headcanon, but just something interesting to ponder. Now it looks like the horses are getting stuck in the mud, so Colette decides to get out of the carriage and decides to help him out. Unfortunately, a spear goes right through her abdomen, killing her on the spot. And then we see a field of skeletons being possessed by demon spirits rising up from the ground. Now, the first thing I thought of here was Jason and the Argonauts. That was a stop-motion film made in 1963, and in the film, the various characters are fighting these skeleton-like creatures. So I would bet that Mira was inspired by that film to make this scene right here. Now, Guts throws some daggers into the skeletons, but because they're already dead, it doesn't do anything to them. So Guts has got to find a different way to fight him. So Guts decides to pull out his Dragon Slayer and just goes hacking away. And you get some really nice scenes here of the Dragon Slayer and Guts and the various evil spirits that are possessing the skeletons. And what's really interesting is that you see a lot of pain and anguish and exhaustion in Guts' face here. So you can see how this battle is really taking a toll on him, and it makes you realize that because he's being chased by these demon spirits all the time, he never really gets a rest. I mean, even when he tries to sleep, he's getting possessed in his dreams. Now, Puck is noticing something in the caravan. It looks like the girl, Colette, that died earlier might be stirring about. And then Puck screams out for Guts, and Guts decides to turn around and sees the severed head of Adolf. And it turns out that Colette is the one that did that. And she's got a very malicious smile on her face. Guts is horrified by this sight. He's like, what just happened? It turns out that she was possessed by one of the evil spirits, and she jumps out of the caravan. Guts is having memories of the sweet little girl that gave her a blanket just moments ago. And in this moment, Guts gets stabbed right in the abdomen.
So you have chosen death.
He's of course shocked by this, but not wasting the opportunity, Guts decides to just lop her body off there and then. Obviously he's got no choice at that point, but it looks like there may be some tears coming from his face. So even though he's this brutish, vicious person, does have some empathy. He does have some positive emotions that are sort of repressed within his very being. But of course there's no time to concentrate on that. He's got to get back to slicing up the skeletons, and as he does so, he begins to puke. The situation is just getting the better of him here. I'm sure the fact that he just killed Colette is weighing on him greatly. Just a really nice panel here, this full spread panel of him just jumping through the hordes of skeletons, just lopping off their various bones and such. Finally, day breaks. We see Guts leaning on his sword. The skeletons are all cut up to bits. He's exhausted. He's been spending his whole night fighting these things. And then we finally see the spirits leaving the skeleton bodies and just going off into the air. So it's like, yeah, he was successfully defending himself, but he didn't really accomplish anything because the spirits themselves are unharmed. So it's like, they'll just attack him again some other night. Guts then takes a look over at Colette's body. Puck is really sad. He's like, it wasn't your fault. Don't worry about it. But Guts surprisingly just starts laughing and he's like, yeah, whatever. Shit happens. Like I said, anyone who gets killed because they got caught up in someone else's fight is a small fry. If they can't live their life freely, they're better off dead. And then he says, if you're always worried about crushing the ants beneath you, you won't be able to walk. Now, the various spirits all start telling him that it's useless. They start laughing at him and you belong to us and you're our sacrifice. Guts is obviously exhausted and now they're sort of messing with his mind a little bit. They're making him a little stir crazy. So he decides, you know what? Stop the voices. He just raises his cannon up in the air, fires it off so that he could just kind of get a little brief moment of silence. And yeah, that's it. He's done with the battle and he decides it's time to walk off. But before Puck decides to leave, he looks at all the wreckage and he's thinking to himself, this is the world Guts lives in. It's just an absolute hellhole. And with that, Puck decides, you know what? No matter what the circumstances, I'm going to stick with this man nonetheless. He saved my life, and yeah, that's it.